Welcome, everybody, to this very special episode of the Union Federation podcast, the podcast on the Fandom Podcast Network that discusses all things Star Trek and the Orville. This is an occasion because this is the first ever live episode of the Union Federation. We decided to do this because it is a special occasion for Star Trek, as season 2 of Star Trek Picard has premiered, and we are here to talk all about it. But you know what? I cannot talk about Star Trek Picard, Star Trek Discovery, or the Ready Room without an amazing crew to help me helm the Union Federation podcast. And you know what? I'm starting with my brother from another mother. He's a top-notch security officer and the co-founder of the Fandom Podcast Network, Mr. Kevin Reitzel.
I am ready for some security. So I was going through some of my space bins over here, and look what I found from the 90s, a Star Trek Next Generation phaser TV remote that you could program. Look at that. I don't think it's going to help with any Borg, but it looked cool.
It did look cool. And Kevin, this is a special occasion, our first live Union Federation episode.
It is. I'm really, really excited. And if you are watching this, please comment. We will bring them up and discuss it during the show. Please, please. And if you're listening to this, go back and check out the live YouTube video. It'll be up there. And join us next time.
Well, and for all you people watching now and listening, it's time to really bring in the true, real stars of the podcast, Kevin. So
Yes,
first and
very true.
foremost, she is our top-notch weapons officer and our science officer, Miss Haley Stoddard.
Hello, I am so excited, but I do have to say,
It's irrelevant. Self-determination is irrelevant. You must comply.
I don't know how much complying is going on, but I'm excited to be here.
That's awesome.
You know, yeah, and you know, you're live, Haley. So this is an
I
experience
know.
for you, your first live show on the Fandom Podcast Network. So we're excited for you.
This is very exciting.
But we had to save our ship's holographic captain, our counselor, our cruiser extraordinaire as well, when we'll get to that. The wonderful Miss Amy Nelson.
Well, hello.
Welcome to Union Fed Live.
I know. Thank you so much. Kevin, I have that exact same TV remote.
You do? I thought I was the only one.
I have to say, I'm jealous. That's really cool.
I also have the lightsaber one too for Star Wars. It came out around the same time, but yeah, I still have. I don't know if it still works, but you know, it's still a cool thing.
I think technology has outgrown it, so I don't think we will ever know if it works.
Yeah.
What? It's not compatible with my Roku? What are you talking about? So this is a lot of fun, guys. We've been talking about doing this for a while with Union Federation. Obviously, a very special time with season 2 of Picard premiering. We're very excited about that. But, you know, first, we got to get into a little Star Trek news. But before we do that, we need to explain something. There's really not a lot of Star Trek news. However, we have rededicated the news segment. We would like to make this the official Amy Nelson Cruise segment. Because, Amy, you just had a heck of an experience that you literally just got back from the other day. And it was pretty Trekky, if I must say so myself.
Absolutely. So yesterday I left a week-long Star Trek cruise. And today I'm still every once in a while like, whoa, I just felt the ship, you know. No, this was so memorable. I personally am changed because of my experience there, but the actors that were there gave all of themselves. They loved us. They spoke to us. They sang to us. They danced with us. Like, the level of intimacy and access that we got to see the actors was way better than STLV. And I think everyone knows I love STLV. And the fans there, I mean, yeah, we're just all stuck. It's more intimate because there were only, you know, around 2,000 of us compared to the 5,000s at STLV. But absolutely wonderful. I attended the fundraiser lunch for ALS with Kenneth Mitchell, and we did shots together. Well, he did a belly shot, and we had some wine, so we had a lovely toast. And he gave a beautiful print. And just at that lunch, we raised over $5,000 for ALS.org research there. It was events like that were throughout the ship that just were so special. Another very, very one special dear to my heart was Anthony Rapp did sang to us and gave us a concert, and it was
What did he
very
sing?
emotional.
What did he sing?
Well, I really can't tell you because I was in tears the whole time. Because before he sings, he tells a story and how the song has influenced his life, and it was very special. He sang a lot about his mother.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
One of the things I want to ask you about, Amy, too, because you talked about Kenneth Mitchell, and I'm a big Kenneth Mitchell fan, and I know what's going on with him. First of all, how is he doing?
Okay. His genius, like his brain, and this was one of his messages, like, oh, I'm still a genius just because you see this on the outside. He did this huge rave, and we're talking lights. He did all the music selection. He wrote a wonderful poetry. So in the middle of this rave, we're all bawling because we're listening to this hypnotic poetry, and all the actors are dancing. But what he did was, we had all these big lights, foam lights. We got in circles. And so you had the inner circle was going clockwise. And then we had a band of people encircling that. And then that went counterclockwise. And we went out ring by ring, and Kenneth Mitchell was in the middle. And again, transformational, because we were all working together and enjoying the moment and living this true utopian society of what we want our Star Trek future to be.
That's very cool. Yeah, the other thing I was excited about with him, and then we'll get on to some of the other people, though, is he achieved a dream he had been wanting to do for a very long time on this cruise. And I follow him on social media, so I saw him post about this. He did a stand-up comedy act.
Well, I'm trying to... When was this?
I don't know, but he posted
was
it on his
stage
social media.
And we were always laughing.
Yeah, so he posted about the fact he did a stand-up comedy routine. So maybe he incorporated it in one of his appearances. But I just thought that was very cool.
There's so many, and like I said, the actors are so accessible and out there. One other thing that I wanted to point out was we had our own Star Trek museum. They had costumes, props. It was so beautiful. They had all of the Strange New World main cast, uniforms, badges, everything. They had Burnham and Book, when Burnham in her red leather jacket and Booker and when they're out scavenging, and his big scarf and the big boots. They had Discovery, all the uniforms for season 4. The Quat Malat sword. Remember the tree, little crystal that creates your family tree? That was there. Like, really amazing to see these things. They had a beautiful costume for Saru. Just, and you're like, oh my gosh, as worn by Doug Jones. And you're like, oh.
So you mentioned Burnham. Sonequa Martin Green was on this cruise.
Yes, she was a beautiful human being, and she was walking around. Actually got a picture of her walking the promenade, and we were just hanging out and snapped a picture. She came over and said a few words, and I mean, they're there with us. It's amazing.
Yeah, I did notice that Wilson Cruz, he was also on the cruise. He made a comment. I guess apparently he has family in Orlando. He's like, I'm staying with family for 3 days, and my first goal is to actually get 24 hours straight of sleep. So It sounds like they were constantly going throughout the entire cruise.
Yes, and John Billingsley, Anthony Montgomery, Connor Trenier, all wonderful. Chase Masterson. Oh, there was Haley. This panel, Women of Trek. Brilliant. Not a dry eye in the house again.
Oh.
Terry Farrell, Nana Visitor, Chase Masterson, Jane Brooke, Admiral Cornwell was there, Mary Chiefo, telling their stories. And what was so brilliant was, like, they're telling their life truths and intertwining it with their characters. I'm so excited. I hope this is the direction of where these panels will be going. I mean, we've spent, 35 years talking about the characters. Let's now go deeper and talk about how we can build a true Star Trek future.
That's awesome. It sounds like it was just an incredible experience. I saw a lot of pics on social media from other people I knew who were on the cruise. It looked fantastic. So that's great. We're gonna pry you for more stories next episode too, Amy. Once you've had a chance to really absorb anything. But Haley,
Hey,
Kevin,
can I
any
just squeeze in
questions?
one more? Don't mind, real quick. What kind of costumes did you personally wear, Amy, and what were some of your favorites that you saw?
Oh my gosh, there were some amazing lower decks, like some crazy, awesome Mir Boimler. Badgie was there. I got my picture with Badgie and,
Ah,
Rutherford. Just so wonderful. Yeah, those were good. Borg, of course, all of your uniforms and the admirals and the Discovery and
that's great. That's so
yeah,
cool.
so many. I wore my Picard and my lower decks.
Great. That's awesome.
Very nice. And of course, like I said, once Amy gets recovered and absorbs everything, we're gonna get some more stories out of her. We're not done with Cruise Amy Nelson yet, but we are going to move on. It is time to fire up that quantum drive because we are here to talk about the season premiere of Picard season 2, The Stargazer, as well as Discovery season 4, episode 11, Rosetta. So let's crank up that quantum drive. Now, to the listeners and to my crew here, before we get started, there's a very important piece of business I need to take care of. That is right. It is spoiler alert. We are going to be diving deep into both the latest episode of Picard and the latest episode of Star Trek Discovery. So if you have not watched those episodes yet, and if you haven't, go get them watched, then come back, join us, because we're going to reveal plot synopsis, surprises, all kinds of great stuff. So spoiler warnings ahead for anybody who is continuing on here with us on this live broadcast of the first ever Union Federation Live. But we are going to kick things off with the season premiere of Star Trek Picard Season 2, Episode 1, The Stargazer. Now, Amy, you've had your cruise, you're relaxed, you're chill. Are you ready to... We normally call this the Captain's Log. For Picard, are you ready to give us the first entry into the Admiral's Log?
Oh, the yes, absolutely. Well, we have retired Admiral Jean-Luc Picard rejects the romantic advances of his housekeeper Laris a year and a half after the death of her partner Zhaban. After giving a speech to a new class of cadets, including his former ward Elnor, in his role as Chancellor of Starfleet Academy, Picard visits his old friend and bartender Guinan to talk about his lifelong avoidance of romantic relationships. In deep space, Captain Chris Rios and Dr. Agnes Girardi of the USS Stargazer investigate an anomaly that broadcasts a request to meet with Picard to negotiate joining the Federation. They are joined by 7 of 9, a vigilante flying Rios's old ship, La Serena, and a fleet of starships, including the USS Excelsior, which has Elnor and Picard's old first officer, Rafi Musikor, on board. When Picard arrives, a Borg ship emerges from the anomaly and transports their queen onto the Stargazer. The queen begins assimilating the entire fleet, prompting Picard to initiate the Stargazer's self-destruct. After the explosion, Picard wakes up in a version of his home and is greeted by Q, an extra-dimensional being who has long put Picard on trial.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, let's get into our first reactions of this episode. I just have to hit something very close to me. Jean-Luc, what is wrong with you? Because if Laris was asking me to be in a relationship, I would be saying yes as fast as I could, but that's just my personal opinion. I am a big Orla Brady fan myself, but guys, this was I think this was a phenomenal episode of Picard to start off the new season. Haley, ladies first, going to start with you. What did you think of this episode of Star Trek Picard?
This was incredible. I really enjoyed everything in this episode. And surprisingly, and I know we'll get into it later, but there's so much in this episode that calls back to TNG, besides having Guinan and Q. And I really enjoyed it. It was so well done.
Mr. Reitzel?
This was hitting a lot of the feels. I haven't rewatched the first season of Picard, and in a way, I'm kind of glad that I didn't, because I wanted to kind of just go in without really remembering a lot of stuff. So when stuff kind of started coming back to me, there's this really kind of cool, refreshing nostalgia that hit me. And just the look of it overall, the sets, and just seeing these characters in this new setting. And Kyle, I agree with you, man. I'm looking at that Laris scene with Picard. I'm even looking at the scene when Agnes is getting hit on at the party. I'm like, come on, just say yes for the night. Hit it harder than that moon hit praxis. Come on.
Just real quick, Amy's having a little bit of a technical issue. It's kind of hit that galactic barrier, a little static in her signal, so she will be back shortly. So guys, for me too, there were so many things in this episode, so many things that kind of hit home, and it was just, there was something refreshing about this first episode to me, where just getting back to these characters, and I've almost forgotten how much I love some of these characters, especially Rios and things like that. And I think one of the interesting aspects was just seeing where everybody was at here, and we're going to talk about that a little more. But I'm going to ask you guys right out real quick: was there any big surprises for you that in this episode that stood out? Like something that
for me, the biggest thing is Seven merged all the hollows. Like, no, why would you do that? Each one is so fun and unique, because wasn't there 7 of them? And now there's just one. It's just Emmett, which is great because Emmett's hilarious. But I liked all of them uniquely for their own distinction, and I'm kind of sad about that.
I'm willing to bet we haven't seen the last of some of those hollows. I'm just playing a guess there. What about you, Kevin? Any big surprise from this episode?
Not really. Just that it was nice to see them kind of come into a situation where, even though we're going to get this probably a much more intense story through the rest of the episodes, it was nice to kind of see people doing their stuff, doing their jobs, learning their way, and just kind of in casual uniforms, and seeing everyone kind of like, when you see Picard on the Stargazer, seeing everyone stand to attention for him was really cool. I loved that. And seeing, people reuniting and even when you see Seven on the big screen there on Stargazer, and seeing Rios for the first time in a while was nice. And he's like, "What have you done to my ship?" He's like, "It's my ship now." That was just really cool.
Well, I mean, you have to admit that if you were, an ensign or, a lower ranking officer, and Admiral Picard comes on, I mean, come on, wouldn't you all giddily be like, "Oh my God, it's Admiral Picard"?
There must be a special training seminar in Starfleet Academy to go how not to fanboy over legendary admirals and captains. I'm going up there going like, give me a selfie and whatever futuristic selfie is. I'm just like, God, how do those guys just go like, attention, like?
But somebody did it. They were like, "It's Admiral Picard."
Yeah,
like you can hear it in their voice. It's great.
And I just got to say too, that reunion with Guinan too was just, it hit the feels, and just the look when you see Picard looking up and seeing the 10 sign. I'm just like, yeah.
I have a question for you guys.
Yeah, absolutely.
One thing, what did you think about the fact that we're a few years out from season 1, and they've taken the Borg cube and have integrated some of the technology into some of the ships? Oh, you're giving me.
We'll get to that.
Okay, I was just asking, because that was a shocker. I thought that would be something Starfleet would never do.
That is something we are going to get to. Do not worry,
all right,
weapons
okay.
officer.
One thing I did want to
phaser.
I will say, Kyle, I want to go back to your question about any big surprises. There was something that actually surprised me was how well the costumes were in this. The uniforms, those just blew me away. I even liked Agnes's outfit, that kind of teal blue color outfit she had. That looked great. I thought Soji looked great as well in that kind of party dress. I mean, it was just the costume designer was killing it in this episode.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. That's a good point. But Kevin, as our top-notch security officer, you're very good at digging up some trivia on these missions. So what have you got for us for this Star Trek Picard?
All right, I got some trivia dirt here. There we go. So Picard concluded the pilot episode of TNG by saying, "Let's see what's out there. Engage." In this episode, he reveals that the phrase, "let's see what's out there," came from his mother, who is not an explorer. Picard refers to Elnor as the first fully Romulan, a cadet at Starfleet Academy. The fully qualifier is a nod to the character Simon Tarsis from TNG, the drumhead, who was revealed to be 1/4 Romulan. So it doesn't quite count. And of course, as I teased earlier, it is shown on the address of Guinan's bar is number 10 on Forward Avenue, which makes it 10 Forward. This is the same name of the recreational lounge or mess hall on board the USS Enterprise D, in which Guinan was the proprietor, named so for being located on deck 10 in the forward section.
Brilliant.
And I would just like to welcome back, after she has recharged her dilithium crystals, Miss Amy Nelson.
Check and see if she's been Borgified, though. Make sure it's actually Amy, not a Borg clone or something like that.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, guys.
Hey, you know what? It's that galactic barrier. It gets you every time. But anyway, we were just giving our first reactions to Picard. So I have 2 questions for you. Obviously, your first reactions. And was there anything that surprised you? Was there like something that just like, whoa, this kind of hit me out of left field? Wasn't expecting that.
Yeah, so let me just say I was watching Picard in a room full of fans. We got to see it all together. I had Garrett Wong, Harry Kim just hanging out behind me, chit-chatting, no big deal.
No big deal.
No.
Name dropper. Name dropper.
Oh, I heard that drop from way over here. Woo!
No, but when all the right places where you want to cheer in your heart, you experienced it because all the fans were woo, or the it was wonderful. I'm going to be honest with you, what really threw me and I was surprised, and I'm not sure that I'm loving this angle, is the romance that it was hit so strongly right at the beginning with Picard and Laris, or Picard and anyone. I was like, whoa, I did not even think we'd be going into that part of his heart. So it intrigued me. I'm cautiously prepared for it.
I have a thought on that.
Go ahead, Haley.
I have a thought on that too.
Well, okay, save those thoughts because we're gonna get into that actual distinction a little bit more later. But what were your overall thoughts on the episode too, Amy?
Yeah, no, I liked it. Let me think about it. Yeah, let's just get into it because I'll have my thoughts there.
Okay, that sounds good. So it is time to hit the transporter and go on some away missions. Okay, Mission 1, Picard Season 2 is here. We got a lot of things to talk about. One of the things I think is most interesting is where are they now? Where Picard's crew has gone since the end of Season 1 and where they are at now. With Rios being the captain of the Stargazer, you have Agnes and out on diplomatic missions kind of being the synthetic babysitter for Soji. You have Seven out venturing off in Rios's ship, but her ship now. So we've got that. We have Picard kind of being almost like a headmaster in a way at Starfleet Academy a little bit. They're all in interesting places. What were your feel? I want to give each of you a chance to kind of give me what your feelings were of where they are now, and you think it fit their characters for where they are now compared to where we ended Season 1 of Picard. Picard. Kevin, I'm going to start with you on this one.
I kind of expected Seven to be kind of on the fringe doing her stuff, and I expect Picard to still be attending wine, and I expected to see him see Guinan. Agnes kind of still wondering a little bit about the problems that she went through, and now she's kind of past it, but not really. Especially that comment that Picard made, on the bridge when he first saw her again. But seeing Rios on board the Stargazer with a cigar in his hand, how freaking cool is that? Just gonna say, I did not expect a cigar. I just thought that was cool. I kind of expected everyone to be there. Elnor, I wasn't quite sure. I was kind of surprised about that a little bit, but it was nice to see that. And Rafi in command, doing her thing. It was nice to kind of see her back on her feet again, So yeah.
Haley, what about you?
Yeah, I think everybody was where they would have been. Although, to a degree, I was kind of expecting them all to be together still on the La Serena instead of scattered and doing different things. For Soji to essentially be a diplomat for synthetics and going around and telling these other worlds, please don't be afraid of synthetics. It's okay. That I think is really appropriate. Although clearly she's getting really tired of doing that, would be my guess by our conversation with Dr. Girardi. And I was surprised with Rios. It was nice to see him still have the beard and scruffy, scraggly hair to a degree, even though it's cut. But back in Starfleet and back in command of a ship, which he really feels comfortable doing, obviously. But that was kind of a little bit of a shock to me. But to your point, Kevin, I don't think he'll ever get rid of the cigars. The cigars aren't going away, whether he's on a Starfleet ship or not.
Amy, what about you? What did you feel about where everybody was at? Were there any big surprises as far as where you think they were at compared to what you thought maybe they should be at?
I thought this was the perfect beginning for each of them. It was like, oh, here's my old friends and they're where they should be, or, in my mind, or, they just were on the next step in life. And it seemed a very natural progression. I felt, I wasn't really surprised, Haley. When you mentioned like they were on different places, I didn't even think that they would still be on the same ship. But that's interesting. You would say that. Yeah.
I think for me, there was a couple of surprises, and more just because of where we left the characters at the end of season 1. I was a little surprised at where Raffi was. I was actually a little surprised Elnor was in Starfleet Academy, but I can understand why that. And Rios, I was surprised, but I wasn't. I think it's very much, he probably came back to be a ship's captain because he was getting the Stargazer. And I think obviously Picard probably had a lot to do with that as well. I'm hoping that there's a explanation of kind of everybody's path during the season, during that time frame, so we can kind of get a little better idea of what they've been through as well. But I really thought that was quite interesting. The other thing I'm going to is mission 2, and it's the return of old friends and enemies. And I want to start with the Borg Queen. And this is where I want to get to you and what you were bringing up, Haley, because I'm sorry, if I'm Starfleet, I don't care if there's even one Borg still out there. If there's one Borg still out there, I am not incorporating Borg technology into my ships. And yet Starfleet kind of went, okay, yeah, we're going to do it. And now, is there a price to pay? The Borg Queen is back. Is she a villain? Is she, what's going on there? There's a mystery to it. Is Q involved with getting the Borg Queen back involved in all of this as well? There's so many things, but Haley, I'm going to, since you were the one who brought that up first, I want to start with you as far as the Borg Queen is back and the Borg are looking to join the Federation, or are they looking for revenge?
Yeah, so that was really interesting to me. And you guys can correct me if I'm wrong, but did we think in season 1 that the Borg had been completely wiped out, or did we think that they were still out there?
I still thought there was Borg out there.
And that's kind of my thought too, but they had been, as in this episode they talked about, they're so diminished that their capacity to really potentially be a threat is decreased so much. But what you said, Kyle, I still don't know if I would want to incorporate any Borg technology. I get that with the advancements and the combinations of all of the different species that they've encountered and incorporated technology from, to a degree, you'd be like, hey, maybe there's something a little bit better out there. Maybe there's something that we can take. And I can see where maybe the writers maybe took a little bit of a nod from Discovery with going into the future and integrating programmable matter onto the ship itself to kind of match the technology of everybody else. I can kind of get that. But this is Borg technology. And that is just really, really scary and really dangerous because of the past encounters we've had with them. I am on the Borg are back to try to increase their numbers. I don't think they're trying to join the Federation. I think they're trying to cause some really not great stuff. That's where I'm at.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Amy, were you going? Would you? I can't imagine Picard and Seven supported this idea of let's put Borg tech in our ships.
Well, it is, yeah. You're wondering where they're going, especially after season 1. I mean, that's the whole point of Soji being this emissary and Girardi going around to spread the good news of, symbionts.
Synthetics.
Symbiots. Symbionts?
No.
Synthetics. Yeah.
Why do I keep saying? Okay, synthetics. Yeah.
That was Deep Space Nine.
Oh, yes. Thank you. Yeah. So they're going around and trying to spread the good word. And I find it interesting that 7 of 9 is sort of feeling like she's getting judged because of her Borg. And now with this technology that there's fear. And I think with both of those examples, we're seeing that the Federation is not in a really good spot because a lot of its members are going to directions of fear. We need to fear the synthetics. We need to fear the Borg. And so I'm hoping that they can use that fear and turn that and make this an exciting story, because I think it's a very interesting point on where we are in our society right now.
I would fear that ship.
Yeah.
Because that ship was scary.
Mm-hmm. That was a very big and evil looking ship there's, Kevin.
Yeah, there's something here that I think they're going to try to take a unique angle with the Borg here, because just having the Borg as a threat has been done several times already. And this attachment that Picard has to them with, him being assimilated as Locutus, and this kind of insight and second mind that he shares with them in his own way. I think there's a bigger picture out there. I'm not necessarily saying that, like they teased in this episode, that they want peace. I just think that there is something else that's happening, and Q has a hand in this too, because he's had a man crush on Picard for quite a long time. He loves trying to, poke him and seeing what he can do. But I think he really respects Picard in a certain way, and in a way has kind of always been kind of looking out for him, but still letting stuff play out by itself. But like we saw in Tapestry, great episode of TNG. I kind of get a feeling we're getting a kind of final act Tapestry Part 2 here, I feel, and I hope anyway. I could be reaching. But when you involve the Borg, because it was Q who introduced them to the Borg, and as much as that sucked, at least they were somewhat prepared for when they started hearing about the Borg, and when they were able to finally have conflict or confrontation with them, they had a little bit of insight of what they were dealing with.
Kevin, I want to ask you, with that whole speech that Picard gave about time and second chances, and you bring up Tapestry, and I'm like, what is he talking that we don't have second chances? We have an entire episode of Picard having a second chance. We have Thomas Riker that's an act of a second chance.
To clarify, he said we don't always get second chances.
Yeah. And so I'm like, that just sort of went in contrast where it's like, we don't get them. And I'm like, there's too many examples, especially in Star Trek. And that was just two right off the top of my head from Next Gen. You can't tell me that there's other series that don't have second chances. So I wish they would have chosen that. I loved his speech about time and going back and forward like that. But then the second chances, that just tipped me over the edge. I didn't like it.
The way that I took that was that advice that our parents tell us is, do as I say, not as I do. Learn from us. Don't make our mistakes. And, you know, because he just bailed on Varys, you know. And so is he going to get a second chance with her? We don't know. So, but I think that's just sage advice coming from the Admiral and this famous explorer of like, just grab it, go for it and grab it, try to get what you want, and don't just sit by and watch life pass you by.
Now, I have one question about Picard with his Borg. Picard is in a new body. There's none of those Borg parts remaining from Locutus in Picard's body. He's in this new golem body. So do the Borg have that kind of influence on Picard that they used to, where they could get messages to him? I think this is something that a lot of people seem to kind of put aside, at least in this first episode. He's in that golem body. So yeah. I'm curious about that. Haley, I got to jump to you here because you're giving some looks. And
yes, the facial expressions don't lie. No, I think with that though, if we go back to it, and same with like Gray in Discovery, is yes, the body is different, but the mind is not. The mind is the same. And, you know, yes, they removed the Borg implants from the body, but that doesn't necessarily mean that mentally those connections aren't still there. And so that's where I go with that.
Interesting thought.
And it wasn't so much that they were calling out to him and he felt their presence. They transmitted the signal. And so they probably don't know that, hey, he's got a synthetic body, but mentally he still has that connection to them.
Yeah. Good point. So let's talk about, we're talking about return of not only old enemies, but also old friends. Guinan is back. We knew Whoopi was cast. We saw it live. Patrick asking her to come on the show. She's hanging out. I don't know. I think she might be in a downgrade from 10 Forward on the Enterprise in this Los Angeles dive bar, but she's back, and it was a absolutely heartwarming episode. But one thing that I stood out, and this is what I want to ask you guys: is Guinan telling Picard that he needs to explore his own final frontier, and it's not in space; it's inside his own heart? That was kind of how I pulled some stuff from that conversation. I'm curious what you guys pulled from that, and just the excitement of seeing Guinan back on the screen. Amy, I'm going to start with you here.
Yeah, Guinan, so good to see her. And the hat, I didn't know how much I missed just the whole look of Guinan, and imbues wisdom. And gotta talk about that at the ready room. I won't say it here. But I loved just their chemistry. You can tell that they're old friends. And of course, the lines that were written call back to TNG, you know, putting on that warm blanket, those two characters. For me personally, I could have gone without the line of, well, we don't age, but we can control it if we want to, but I don't care. Of course, I know these actors are older. I'm older, so I didn't even need that line, but I'm sure the writers felt it necessary to include for some, you know, someone else to enjoy.
Haley?
I have a thought on that. I think that just calls back to the theme of this episode, which is time. You know, we're going to get to Q. Q pops in and then he, you know, snaps his fingers because he's like, oh, you've aged. Well, let me fit in with you. And so I think that's why that line from Guinan was in there, is because of this theme of time, which I think is going to be something that's going to encompass the whole season. No, it was great. I loved seeing her back, and that they still kept her costume and her look the same for the most part. Was just fantastic. And I love that she asked if he wanted hooch.
Kevin, I know you've been waiting for this for a very long time. You wanted Guinan in season 1. Whoopi is here. I thought it was a very interesting conversation they had, not only as two old friends, but Picard seeking his sage advice from Guinan as well, which he has done so many times. I just thought it was a very powerful scene, but I think it was a very enlightening scene and conversation as well.
Yeah, Patrick Stewart basically called out Whoopi Goldberg on live TV, said, "Yeah, you got a spot for you here. We want you." And this was the culmination of it. And it was totally worth it. Let's put it this way. I think Picard needs to see Guinan on a weekly basis. Not every 30 years or whatever it is, because she knows what's good for him. And I love the relationship. And she's basically just saying, look, settle down. You've done so much and you've always put duty first and exploration first. Find some happiness with us, have someone around you, whether it's starting a family or just having a companion, someone that you could just do things with. And I'm sure most of us have been in a situation, a relationship like that when you can share moments with people, even not just like big moments, whether it's trips or, holidays, but just small moments too, whether it's sitting on a couch and enjoying something together or a walk or whatever. It's basically what she's saying. That's what I got from it, and, we just saw him, take off with Varys looking at basically the afterburners of his ship. And, and it's time for something like that to happen, I think. And it is really, really important for that. And I just want to mention that, at the end of Generations, we saw Kirk die. And in the Shatnerverse non-canon books, he survives that. The Borg actually work with the Romulans to regenerate his body with Borg technology to use him as a weapon against the Federation. But one of the things that I liked about that was that we know that in that particular offshoot of fandom, he got a second life. He found a love. He got married. He had a kid, and I think that it would be great if somehow we find out later on there is a Picard offspring, because it was so sad in Generations when his family died in that fire. And he says in a kind of heartbreaking address to everyone that he's the last Picard. Do we want that to happen? So that question's there.
That's a good point.
No, go ahead, Kyle.
That was a good point, and then one I wanted to bring up, because I felt that was a key thing too when he's giving that speech and talking about how he is the last Picard, and he's talking about his ancestors. And I think that is going to be something that's going to be a big part of this season of Picard, is the future of the Picard line and how he's dealing with that. But Haley, I didn't mean to step on your toes. So
no, I'm sorry. No, I thought it was interesting, and you guys, if you have any thoughts on this, that there's a topic that Guinan and him have not talked about. There's an aspect to him that she doesn't know, which is really, really interesting, because all through TNG, once Guinan appears, you just go that they've had this great friendship, that they know everything and that they've discussed everything. And I thought that was really a subtle thing, but really kind of pretty.
Yeah. So very interesting. But guys, we got one more enemy, frenemy, man crush, as Kevin would say. Q is back. We only saw him for one brief scene, but it's John Delancey, and he just chews up the scene like it's going out of style. Kevin, it's Q, man.
I was happy that they got how are we going to address the Q actors aged? And I love the fact that we get a quick little scene of him de-aged, and he's like, oh, that's not fair, or now we're even, and he snaps his fingers, and then we got that great Silver Fox Delancey looking at us, which is great. So this was important when we started seeing the rumors, and then we started to get the confirmation that John Delancey was coming back. I think it's important that when you have a Picard series, you have certain characters intertwined with him that have been game changers. And those game changers have been Guinan and, of course, Q. So I'm glad that he is in here. You know, I feel, though, that he's going to have a bigger storyline than just kind of like showing Picard the tapestry. There's more to it with Q coming up. And I have more comments I'll share on that later.
Amy?
Yeah, I too really loved the snap of the finger. And to me, that age description fit because Q is always changing outfits and his look. So to me, that fit in. I didn't even think twice about it. And I like how when he comes in, like at the moment that the La Sirena is going to explode, like we get ripped from that moment. And so was that Q or was that Picard reliving going back to that arboretum with the glass and the painted glass and his memories with his mother, which I thought was just beautiful. And so I'm wondering, where is the line between Picard's memories and what Q is doing? And I think that mesh is interesting. And can I just say one more thing about the arboretum and his memories with his mother? To me, this was a complete callback to my favorite TNG movie, Nemesis, where Shinzon and Picard are sharing a dinner and they're talking about how each of them would look up to the stars and dream of a future and the exploration. Like that back and forth between Shinzon and Picard, when they're remembering that in their childhood, we're seeing that here in Picard. And it just made me so very, very happy.
Amy, or Haley, are you gonna snap your fingers and something might happen?
Oh, that would be so cool. I would love that. No, this was, I think, great. I think it was well done. I was curious to know how they were going to introduce Q into the episode, just because I know he's going to play such a pivotal role in this season. But I really, really like that. And I do. I loved his like, oh, you've aged. And then it's like, okay, I better fix myself. And he's aged so well. It's just great. It was great to see him. And I loved the callback of, welcome to the end of the road not taken. And I think that was just so fantastic to really call back to TNG of, hey, this is the end. If you had made these other choices, this is where you would have ended up. And it's going to be great to see what that looks like.
I think there's some interesting things with Q. I think Q is going to be the main kind of thread throughout this entire season, with tying in with a lot of different things. I'm just looking forward to more John Delancey, Patrick Stewart playing off of each other because they do it so well. And when they do it, it's like they're just putting on that comfortable pair of shoes and they're into it with the ground running. I'm really excited for what we could be seeing here. I think there's a lot of mystery to this. I'm looking forward to it. Guys, before we wrap up on Picard, is there any final thoughts that you want to get out about this season premiere of Picard? Kevin, I'm going to let you go first here if you've got anything else you want to bring up as a point.
I'm curious to see what new characters that we get introduced and how that will affect. My comment about the Borg having a new angle here, I'm hoping really happens, because I don't want that to become tired. That's my only concern going into Picard right now, is what the Borg angle is. But I have a good feeling that we're going to be in for a ride, and seeing the little sneak peeks to what's happening later in this season has gotten me really excited for this series. And it's funny too. I did want to mention, when I was watching Patrick Stewart be Picard, I've noticed how he's aged between season 1 and now season 2. But I love the fact that they are showing that and embracing it, because the way that I've seen myself age in the last 2 years, I only hope I can age as gracefully as Sir Patrick Stewart has.
Fair enough.
Haley, what about you? Any other thoughts on the episode before we close the
Yeah.
chapter on.
Yeah, I have one. And I don't know if you guys caught this. So I am a big World War II buff. I really love World War II history and things like that. The song with the Borg kind of towards the end of the episode, which is titled "Non je ne regrette rien," and I'm probably butchering that French, so I'm sorry about that, was sung by Edith Piaf. And she was a French singer who she sang for the Germans, and but she was actually part of the French resistance. And so I thought that was kind of interesting to throw this song in with the Borg, because they're coming in and they're saying, we want to join the Federation, but, you know, Piaf, she was deemed a traitor and a collaborator with the Germans, so she was going to be charged. And so it's kind of an interesting throw to throw this song in by this famous French singer who kind of played both sides. And so the Borg is kind of playing both sides at this point. So it was kind of an interesting, anyway. So yeah.
Amy, any other things that maybe grabbed you that we haven't mentioned?
Yes, Haley, thank you for sharing. That is very interesting.
Oh, yeah.
Adds another layer. You know, I was wondering, like, how are they going to connect Soji with the synthetics to the Borg? Because we're seeing Soji and we're seeing that there is, you know, action going on. So she's got to get pulled in. And what's going to be that angle? Like, we know Borg are experts at technology. And if that's all synthetics are, then a mere link up to Bluetooth. I mean, I don't know. There's what's the firewalls? How are we going to protect? Is there enough sentience where they can, quote unquote, resist the Borg? You know what I mean? So I'm very interested in to see if that angle folds out.
There's a lot of mystery. Yep.
Stairs on ships. Why? It's a tripping hazard. Like, so bad. It's like Tom Paris's wheelie chair on Voyager. Why would you have a chair on wheels?
Agreed.
Well, there's a lot of mysteries to Picard season 2 that we are going to be covering in full here on the Union Federation podcast, but there's a lot of things we got to cover for this week's episode yet still. So we're going to take a quick break, get things recalibrated, and then we'll be back to talk to Ready Room and a little Star Trek Discovery. But for now, here's what's happening on the Fandom Podcast Network.
Thank you for listening. We hope you're enjoying this podcast. We'd like to continue to feed your ears by inviting you to listen to these other great shows on the Fandom Podcast Network. It starts with our flagship show, Culture Clash, discussing the latest in entertainment pop culture. Bloody Kings, Immortals Take Notice, our show covering the entire Highlander universe. Couch Potato Theaters, where we celebrate our favorite movies. Time Warp, the Fandom Flashback podcast discussing a year in movies and our favorite retro movie and TV pop culture topics. Good Evening, discussing all things Alfred Hitchcock. Union Federation, our Star Trek and Orville show. Hair Metal, the 80s and early 90s rock metal podcast. Type 40, our show covering the time-traveling Doctor Who universe with host Dan Hadley. Lethal Mullet, an 80s and 90s action film podcast with host Adam P. O'Brien. Also check out the Lethal Mullet Network for more great podcasts. What a Piece of Junk, a Star Wars podcast with hosts Scott, Derek, and Nathan. Making Treks, a Star Trek podcast, a deep dive into the final frontier with host Mark Newbold and Adam P. O'Brien. And check out our newest shows, The Fandom Show, our monthly Fandom Podcast Network live YouTube exclusive show about the month's hottest topics in fandom, and the FPN True Believers MCU podcast, discussing the Marvel Cinematic Universe and the related Marvel television and streaming MCU universe, including the connections to the original Marvel comics. You can find the Fandom Podcast Network on several platforms. Please subscribe to the Fandom Podcast Network YouTube channel to receive notifications of new podcast episodes and live events. You can enjoy all of the Fandom Podcast Network audio podcasts on our master feed at fpnet.podbean.com. The Fandom Podcast Network is on all major podcast platforms, including Apple Podcast and iTunes. You can find the Fandom Podcast Network on Facebook, You can email us at fandompodcastnetwork@gmail.com. You can also find the Fandom Podcast Network on Instagram at Fandom Podcast Network and on Twitter at FanPod Network. Thank you for listening, and remember, respect others and enjoy your fandom.
And we're back, and hopefully you're enjoying everything we're doing here at the Fandom Podcast Network as we just strive to make better podcasts to feed your ears. Guys, it's usually we save the Ready Room for the end of the show, but because the Ready Room was so Picard heavy this week, let's get into it. Let's talk about the Ready Room, because obviously, first and foremost, some great interviews in this week's episode. They had a great segment with Whoopi Goldberg talking about returning as Guinan. A lot of great comments there. We had an interview with Sir Patrick Stewart. We got a look inside the Stargazer. So much to go on. What stood out for each of you for this episode of the Ready Room? Kevin, I'm going to start with you here.
Yes. First of all, I always love when Will Wheaton is basically interviewing his space mom, her space dad, or space, uncles, or whatever as he refers to them. And Picard's basically, space dad. There's one thing there when they brought up the topic about Q, and obviously Will says, "I know you can't spoil anything," but then Sir Patrick Stewart says, "I believe I can say this. I think you're going to see not only Picard learning more about himself, but you're also," and I'm paraphrasing here, so forgive me, but he says Q will also be learning more about himself. And I think that if you're going to bring Q back, it's important for him to do that and not just be the Q that's mischievous and causing trouble with Picard and going back and forth, because I think that is some character development we really need from the character of Q. Otherwise, he's just going to become a broken record. As much as we like it, we want to see something new from Q, and I'm excited for that.
Amy, what about you? What stood out for you in the Ready Room?
One thing that I just loved hearing was the reunion of them being back together on set with both, John Delancey as Q and Picard, and Guinan and Picard. Like, it was so wonderful to hear Picard explain it, like, when you have an old friend, you just pick up right where you left off and you go to town, and the scenes that they shared, they were just so in character. I couldn't, the way that Guinan and Whoopi Goldberg doesn't talk like Guinan, but yeah, after all these years, she sounded just like Guinan. It's just, that's what I loved. And, they had a little segment with Whoopi. And like I said, that's Whoopi's voice. But Guinan and Q, those actors just are so wonderful. That's what impressed me.
Haley?
I'm awful, and I keep forgetting about the Ready Room. It's a thing.
Too busy with the phaser button, I tell you.
I do. It's just too much fun. I reconfigured it. Only I can use it now.
Yeah, it's bad, but I think for me that what stood out for me for this Ready Room is we had two obviously phenomenal interviews with Patrick Stewart and with Whoopi Goldberg, and like you said, anytime Will's on with anybody from the Next Gen cast, it's just there's that extra energy he has, and especially when it's Patrick or it's Jonathan, especially those two. It's just an extra level, and obviously, we all have such reverence for Patrick Stewart. But what I loved seeing and how they talked in these interviews, and it also goes to John Delancey with Q, the reverence they have for the characters they play, and especially when you hear Patrick talk about it, how it is like it's a family reunion, it's getting together with old friends, it's that comfortableness, and with Whoopi, to hear the reverence she has not only for the character of Guinan, but for Star Trek in general and how important it is to her. And it's so interesting to see how they perceive their characters now compared to back then. And I think it's a growth of appreciation over time. And I think that really was something that stood out to me in both Sir Patrick Stewart's interview and Whoopi Goldberg's interview. Kevin, you got something you
I just want to touch on the clip that they showed, the segment for the USS Stargazer, and that they went back to that old episode. I think it was the battle for TNG with the Ferengi, and showing the original set and how they were clarifying that it was the redress of the Battle Bridge set, and the Battle Bridge set was kind of like a redress of the original Enterprise bridge and stuff, bridge crew or bridge set. But just seeing the fact that they were able to bring back this ship in a newer version is just great, and that the name, the USS Stargazer, will now live on. And I love that old design too that we saw in that TNG episode. But the best part of it was seeing Picard walk onto the set again, or onto the bridge again, and just remembering everything, and just kind of touching the panels and stuff like that. And I love the fact that they brought that back, and I think that was worth a shout out.
That's an excellent point, Kevin. Which reminds me of something. When all of Picard is done, if for somehow we can get a spin-off with Rios as the captain of the Stargazer or some specials, I'm all in, because I love Rios as a captain, and because he's just so different. He's got such a different style as a captain, and I would really love to get more into that experience of Rios.
See, this is where I'm missing the Star Trek experience at the Hilton and having Quark's Bar. I'd love to be able to go up to Quark's Bar and say, "Can you give me one of those Rios cigars? Hook me up."
Amy, you had something you wanted to throw in?
Yeah, just one other thing, that Guinan montage that they put together. I loved when Whoopi Goldberg says that Guinan is like treating them sort of as if they're her own children and grandchildren and great greats. And then they show a clip of her introducing prune juice to Worf, and and the countless times that when they were showing that, I'm like, well, and her taking care of Geordi, and and so when she said that, it was like, this settles the debate. She's not a better counselor. She's a grandmother. And of course, grandmothers are wise and giving advice and caring. So I absolutely loved that. And that is definitely my now new headcanon.
There we go. Okay, guys, that's going to kind of wrap up our thoughts on the Ready Room. Let me do a little adjustment here to the dilithium chamber. How, we have to do a little cross thing with the quantum drive. We're going to warp on over and talk Star Trek Discovery. So, in the joy that is all of this wonderful Star Trek we are getting now, we are entered the world where we have overlapping between shows now. Something, it's been a while since we've experienced this in Star Trek, so we kind of got to adjust a little bit on the fly here. But Star Trek Discovery has 3 episodes left in its season, starting with this week's episode, season 4, episode 11, Rosetta. So we're going to talk a little Discovery. Kevin, would you care to introduce us to the captain's log for this week's episode of Discovery?
I'd be happy to. Burnham decides to visit a dead planet near the hyperfield, which may be the homeworld of species 10C. Earth General Ndoye believes this is a waste of time, but other diplomats support the decision if it provides useful information. Burnham travels to the planet with Saru, Culber, and pilot Kayla Detmer, where they find the large skeletons of a species that once lived in the planet's former gas layers. They also begin to experience hallucinations that create strong feelings such as fear. The team deduced that the 10C fled the planet during meteor strikes that burned away the gas and killed some members of the species, and that the species used complex hydrocarbon compounds to communicate their emotions, which are now affecting them on the planet. They believe that they can use these hydrocarbons to help communicate with 10C. Meanwhile, Book and Tarka follow Discovery to the planet and sneak aboard. Tarka bypasses Zora's sensors to allow their ship to be attached to Discovery undetected, taking engineer Jet Reno hostage in the process. Book convinces Ndoye to help them destroy the DMA.
Okay, guys, we're just going to dive into it. Your first reactions to this episode, because I'm gonna be honest with you. I don't know if I still have a grasp on this episode. This episode was a little all over the place for me. So, Amy, I'm gonna let you go first because you're losing it over there.
Okay. So I know I went and saw this. We actually got it the night before. So it was actually a little preview. And sitting behind me was Wilson Cruz and Anthony Rapp. Just saying.
I think I heard that drop, Kevin.
Yeah, sorry. Hold on. Let me pick up that name drop over here. Jeez. Just jealous. That's awesome.
Oh yeah.
So now, when we're watching this, listeners, you need to know they showed it at 10:30 p.m. Now, this is after a long day of enjoyment, if you shall say.
Translation:
some
Amy
Romulan
don't
ale.
remember nothing.
I remember the feeling, but specifics, and I do remember at the end of the episode, like crying because of Culber, and I was like, "Gosh darn it, Culber made me cry again." And then my friend was like, he's right back there," and we laughed, and he's like, "That's my job. I'm supposed to do that." So. And that's about really all I can say about this episode. I apologize.
Amy was you definitely downing some of Guinan's hooch.
Yes.
Exactly. Kevin, I'm gonna go to you here because I don't. You and I have kind of had a little bit of similar wavelength on Discovery.
Amy was saying that she was crying because of what Culber says. I was just crying. Okay, can I just say this? Every time Jet Reno is on the screen, I just want her to keep talking. Give me the Jet Reno spinoff or something. I just need to see more Jet Reno. It's just I really, really enjoy Tig Notaro's performance. Just so matter of fact. And the thing that was nice too, though, the scene that she gives to I'm sorry, I'm forgetting the ensign's name that was asking about Detmer, the advice about how to approach Detmer. Anyway, I like that scene because she was giving some advice, and then like, you know what, just don't fangirl, so to speak. Not in so many ways, but it was just saying that and doing that. So I thought that was neat. That actually was my favorite moment of the whole episode. Yet we go to another gasish planet where it's dark and they have to wear their spacesuits and stuff happens. And still we have no idea what's going on or who the big threat really is yet or what they look like. And Book is up to shenanigans on the ship with Tarkus. So I'm just right now I'm with Discovery of just like, okay, let's just get to the end right now. Let's see how they wrap this up compared to last season. And I'm just going to be full front here. I'm trying to get information off IMDb, and Kyle and I were talking about this and looking else also on other sources. People aren't even keeping up the IMDb episodes and updating them properly. I don't know what that tells you, but it's hard to get information off IMDb. I'm just gonna throw that out there. Be honest.
Okay, Haley, we need our top-notch weapons officer to, because the science of this episode was just way out there, but
It definitely was, although I am quite intrigued. So most other planets that they've gone and encountered and been on have been class M. This is a gas giant, so we're thinking something like Jupiter or Saturn, and it takes an incredible species to be able to live in that type of environment, even if they're living on the surface or if they're living in the gas. The gases are hot. They have pressure to them. If you're down on the surface, the pressure is immense. So it's I'm intrigued by what this species is and what they look like in order to be able to live on a gas giant, because most things don't. So that's really quite interesting to me. As I was sitting there thinking, I thought, okay, could this be, something like the Medusans? Could this be something like the changelings? What could live in that kind of environment is really quite interesting. And the fact that they potentially had some animal type species that lived also on the planet inside the gas is quite interesting. And so I'm really quite intrigued as to what this species exactly is. This kind of makes it more interesting, and hopefully when we get to them that they're really cool. I'm really hoping they're really cool.
Haley, can I ask you a question real quick regarding what you said about them living in a gas giant?
Yeah.
Does that mean that obviously makes them not necessarily powerful, but being able to live in an environment like that makes them formidable? But does that mean like living in around the sun would be an equivalent type of situation? Our sun?
No, so we're
Or
looking
Jupiter?
we're looking at something like if we lived on Jupiter's surface, or if we
Okay.
lived inside the gas of Jupiter or Saturn, because those are our gas giants.
Okay.
And
Okay.
so, we've sent things, but nothing can penetrate that gas. It ends up exploding inside the gas of that gas giant. So that's why it's really interesting that we have a species who apparently lived on or in the gas of a gas giant and then had to flee their planet because that gas was going away. So they needed the gas to survive, whether they are a species that formed on that planet and evolved to survive in that type of environment, or maybe they had some type of protective suit, which is why I was thinking Medusans to kind of live in that type of environment, because nothing can really survive that type of environment. The pressures are too immense, the heat's too immense, there's too much particles and different types of gas that interact, that it just is. So that's why it's really interesting as to what this species is. I loved, Jet Reno's comment towards the end of like interrupting something. I thought that was great. But I think one thing, because this episode was about communication, that was really interesting was Tarina. She said, we cannot communicate with them if we know nothing about them. And she says that to Ndoye when they're talking about the situation. And I thought that was really interesting, because how many times in our own history have we attempted to communicate with others without knowing anything about them? And it's turned disastrous because we go in not knowing anything. Or, yes, it could turn out fruitful, but most of the time it's not going to. So I thought that was really quite an interesting thing with this episode. I don't like their EV suits. It's going to bother me. But the doctor, and I don't know his name, and I'm not going to look it up right now. Not Dr. Culber, the doctor that's the delegate.
Oh, the linguist. The linguist.
I love him. I think he's fantastic. I love, his bluntness and his sarcasm and whatnot. But he was doing a crossword puzzle, and I thought that was fantastic just to pass the time. I like him. I want more of him.
Well, it's funny you talk about communication, because that's going to lead us to transport on to our away missions for Star Trek Discovery. So, guys, not a lot of away missions here, but Haley kind of hit on our first away mission. Can we find a way to communicate? And I actually think this has been the main subplot of Star Trek Discovery this season, is communication. And I really think this was huge. Here we have Burnham, Saru, Culber, and Detmer. Another one of our bridge crew finally getting more than 3 minutes on the screen, going down to this mysterious planet, and all put to like this emotional test, whether it was fear or, in Detmer's case, a sense of love that she's never even experienced before in her life, while trying to find a way to communicate with species 10C. This was different. I give them credit for coming up with the realization of, hey, our environmental suits have never been around this before. It can't filter this out because it doesn't know it. And I actually think that made a lot of sense, because they are on the other side of the galactic barrier. So I'm actually kind of glad they went that route. But here's my question. Are we satisfied with the way they discovered to communicate? And because here's my thing. We don't know for sure that this was species 10C's planet. We're making a big leap of faith here in this aspect. So are we happy with how this played out? Are we more confused now, or do we just feel like we're spinning our wheels here with Discovery. It's gonna, which leads me to another point I'm gonna get to. But I want to give each of you a chance to answer this question first. Hey, I'm gonna go back to you on this because you kind of started with this idea, and so I'm curious. Do you, especially you being our science officer, do you feel like this is a realistic way to communicate? It's kind of like with the pheromones, again, but we're assuming this is what species 10C is.
That's true. And you bring up a good point that this might not be species 10C. I think, they're banking on this planet was close enough to where this hyperfield is in relation and the Dyson rings around the sun kind of stuff. Okay, we'll just postulate that it's species 10C's former planet. The hydrocarbon thing is really interesting. Like you said, you brought up pheromones. And pheromones are definitely a way that we even communicate without realizing it ourselves. So it's kind of interesting. I don't know necessarily if maybe this is the way they communicate with each other, because how do you give off hydrocarbons to another person to let them know you're feeling a certain thing? To me, this almost felt more along the lines of the Voyager episode Memorial, where there was that pillar that was giving off the signal to any passing ship to memorialize what had happened on that planet. So that's kind of where I felt this episode went, was that, hey, here's how this destruction of this planet went down. So I don't know necessarily if it's going to help them communicate better, but I think it definitely helped them realize that species 10C values life, as they found the nursery, and values communication, which leads to my thinking of they don't know what their drill is doing. I think they don't know that it's destroying planets that have life on them.
Okay, Amy, you were filled with your own version of hydrocarbon compounds while you watched this, apparently. From what you can recall.
Okay, well, listening, I'm remembering a little more. And yeah, Haley, I'm totally with you. Those EV suits, did not like them. When you said that, I'm like, I totally remember that.
The lights by your face, it'd be in your peripheral like all the time. Like, serves no purpose.
Right. Can I move on? Okay, I have a question about Booker. So when you get there, can you come back to me?
Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely. So, Kevin, I want to go to you here, because one of the things we did is all of a sudden, this is something Discovery's been doing that's been a little bit weird this season. It's like we've always talked about the lack of use of the bridge crew, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh, this one character is going to get a spotlight in this episode almost, and they did that with Detmer. But I mean, what was your feeling on this whole thing? Because I found it confusing, and like when they're talking about experiencing the love out of the nursery and everything like that, it just felt like they didn't put a lot of effort into this idea.
Well, I like the fact that Detmer got highlighted in this, because she wasn't affected by the hallucinations, and she couldn't explain why. But she alluded to the fact of the PTSD situation, in that her dealing with that maybe had some type of effect, or she was able to block it and not affect her. But also, too, you had alluded when you started this segment regarding the communication with the aliens, that communication has been a theme with Discovery. What I was trying to remember earlier, too, was, Jet Reno was coaching Adira, that's who I was trying to remember the name, of how to communicate, talking to Detmer, and we got to see that at the end, and I thought that was a very sweet scene. But yes, I was just happy to see someone on the other bridge crew get highlighted again. I think Detmer has definitely been highlighted quite a bit. I would like to see it continue. So of all of the technobabble stuff that's been part of Discovery thus far with 10C or the DMA, whatever you're going to call it, is going in one ear and out the other for me. It's just not catching, and I don't find it interesting yet.
Okay, so that's going to lead us to mission 2, which is Book and Tarka breaking into Discovery, but still not on the same page they each kind of got their own agendas here. That yet they're working towards the same goal, but they're each approaching it in their own way, and it's leading to issues between them, including where Book is looking to make alliances while Tarka is taking hostages. And Kevin, I just got to say this: if we do not have a Jet Reno Tarka back and forth 5-minute conversation in next week's episode, I'm going to be highly disappointed, because that could be one of the most interesting conversations and entertaining conversations we've had in Discovery in a good while.
Agreed. Those two going back and forth and trying, I could just see Tarka giving his argument and Jet Reno just like ripping it apart, So I hope that we do see something like that. But because I think that, I think that those two going back and forth, I hope also will let Jet Reno kind of maybe, because right now she just kind of comes in and does her thing, and we'll have a couple of cool little quippy little liners and stuff like that. But I hope that this series, or in the next few episodes, also develops her character a little bit more, and maybe she can have a bigger hand in helping with finding out what's going on. So I hope so. That would be a lot of fun.
Amy, I'm going to turn it over to you because you have book questions.
One thought. No, I am definitely with you and want to see, Tarka and Jet just go at it, because they're both very sharp and very witty. So why are they working together? It just is not making sense. Like, Kai, you said they're going for this same goal. Really? Is it really? So I'm still not buying it. And so therefore it's this whole working together and sneaking on the ship together. It's fallen flat for me.
I think the aspect, Amy, too, is there's a lot of emotional manipulation by Tarka on Book. And I think that's the initial thought was, yes, the same goal, destroy the DMA. Now, Tarka had other thoughts of why he wanted the DMA destroyed, but he was playing on Book's emotional state. And now that Book's kind of dealing with his emotions and seeing that, because if you look, when he makes the alliance with the Earth delegate, he's like, okay, well, we'll let diplomacy do its thing before we make our move, but we're there. So he's willing to work within the system. And Tarka is so obsessed with his own goal, but he's such a manipulator that Book hasn't completely gotten wise to it yet. That's just my thought. But Haley, you had some thoughts here?
I think that Book has kind of come to realize, and I think the reason that he continues to work with Tarka is to keep an eye on him. I think there's going to be a flip in, I don't know, the next episode or the episode after, where Book is going to turn on Tarka and is going to somehow maybe turn him in, because I think he is realizing, there was in this episode when Tarka is talking about, hey, I have this idea, we'll do this thing and whatnot. And Book says that he's coming with him. And anyway, so they have their conversation. Tarka walks off. The Book turns, and kind of the look on his face kind of makes me think that he was going along simply because he wants to find a different way, and he wants to not necessarily redeem himself, but wants to try. And I think he's doing this to keep an eye on Tarka more than working with him at this point, because he saw what happened when they destroyed the DMA the first time. And I think he's realized that it came back and it's more powerful, that was a mistake, and that's not the route they need to go, even though he still has that revenge in his heart for his planet and what happened. I do think Tarka and Jet, if they go at it, I would be concerned that Tarka would beam her out, because I think he'd just get more annoyed with her. That would be my only concern.
Kevin, any thoughts on this that you want to weigh in here?
I am a little disappointed with the direction that Book's character has done in this season. It started off, good with him losing basically everything. But I'm still at that situation right now where how is he going to fit back into the Discovery and New Federation society after this? Is he going to be written off to do his own thing? I don't know. And I don't know. He's just been less charming this season, and I kind of missed the charming book, the rogue dashing kind of adventurer slash kind of not pirate, but that kind of feel that we got him last season, because he was the highlight for me last season. I just hope that we can see him find some peace and also redeem a little bit about what he has done. That in the eyes of the Federation and the people in charge. And I think that it's important that, when he approached Ndoye, yeah. Am I saying her name right? How do you say it?
Ndoye.
Ndoye.
Yep.
That she'll be able to kind of have his back if he doesn't do anything stupid. So, yeah, there's hope there.
So I want to just throw out a couple quick things here, and then I have one question for everybody involving Discovery. But the two quick things I want to throw out is one, and Amy, this was the part that got you crying. We finally see things kind of come to a head with Culber, and he admits that how much he's struggling. This has been kind of one of those underlying storylines throughout the season that hasn't gotten a lot of attention. Kevin, I know you've had some mixed reactions to this particular thing, but I think it's a good thing, because I think it's bringing that to a head where he's getting an understanding of himself and getting more of a grip on himself as a person and the experiences he's been through. And I think that's for that character and that journey of this character. I think that was a really big moment. And that's why I just wanted to at least bring up as a point. The other thing I wanted to bring up real quick, because I love this scene, was when they get back to the ship and our president asks Saru to go on a walk with him. And just the reaction of Burnham and Stamets and Culber and stuff, it was a great moment. And I think it was a nice little heart-touching moment that was fun within the episode. And I just wanted to get your guys' thoughts on either one of those moments and how they might have stood out. Amy, I'll see what you remember from your cruise days.
Just say that was cool, and I hope to see it again.
I was very touched. Yes, between the Wilson cruise scene.
Too funny.
Kevin, what about you? Because I know these are both one storyline you've actually been kind of interested in, the other one not so much.
Yeah, I want to see how more it develops. And I love the Saru character. I'll be honest with you. I've always, Doug Jones has been great as him, and I like that they're giving him a little something more to chew on in this, and I think that's important.
Haley, what about you?
I think they were both great, although I do have to say I think that Dr. Culber admitting that he's struggling and that he is having a hard time, because, I mean, think about it. He died. He was in the mycelial network, dead, so to speak. He comes back to life. He goes back. He struggles, but then he goes back to work and then he's fine. And we didn't really process it. And one thing that I have enjoyed so far with this season and with the show in general is how much people are not okay after something happens, and they might not be okay for a few episodes. And I like that, because in Trek up to this point, something traumatic happens and then the next episode they're just hunky-dory, like nothing happened, and that's not accurate for real life. And so I think there's a balance with this kind of thing of addressing it but not over addressing it. And so I get why, Kevin, maybe you're tired of it because it might be over addressed. But I like that at least this time he's admitted that, hey, I'm not okay and I'm struggling. And even though he doesn't have a way forward to make that better, he's admitting it to himself, which is a huge step, because getting past that denial is a really big thing.
Okay, guys, I have one more question for you before we kind of close up out here. And it's the fact that we are overlapping shows. And obviously Picard is, I think, if you were to ask most of the fan base, much more beloved of a show than Discovery at this point. I think it's much more popular, has a little bit more of a wider fan base. I'm gonna ask you guys this, and I don't mean it in a negative overtone, but I'm just kind of trying to get a feel for the room here. The fact that we're overlapping the season finale of Discovery with the launch of Picard, do we feel? I kind of get a feeling like Discovery's kind of almost like forgot. Oh, okay, we filled your time with Discovery, but now Picard's here, so we're gonna kind of forget about Discovery. It feels like even though Discovery's coming to its season finale, it's just Picard has taken over. This week's episode of the Ready Room had no mention of Discovery at all. It was all Picard based. Um, has Discovery become the forgotten stepchild of Star Trek right now with this overlap? Amy, I'm going to start with you because you just had the whole cruise experience, and I was kind of curious to see what people were saying on the cruise about Discovery and such.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. It really reminds.
Okay, we're going to time you out, Amy,
hear
because
me?
you're getting a really bad reverb echo.
Okay.
So
All right.
make an adjustment if you can. But Haley, what about you? What do you think?
I don't think so. I think it's, because there are people who Discovery is their show and they're going to watch Discovery and they might not tune into Picard while Discovery's on. I tend to, have a couple shows in rotation maybe that I'm watching, but generally, I watch one and then I finish it and then I'll start another one. And so I think there's that aspect to this that some people might just be waiting. Yeah, we're going to watch Picard and I'm excited, but I might hold off and finish Discovery first. So I don't think it necessarily is making it forgotten. I think just that, for us, most of us here, we're so excited for Picard because we have that connection to his character so much from our childhood. And Discovery's new. And so people who are maybe younger who never watched other things, their connection is to Discovery. So I don't think it makes it forgotten. I think it's just that it's winding down and Picard's picking up. And so it's like when football season starts winding down and then basketball season kind of overlaps. And so you're prepping for basketball season. And so you're excited for basketball season, but that doesn't mean you're any less excited for football season to end. It's just that weird overlap and making that balance because you're more excited for the new thing because the other thing you've been dealing with for months. That makes sense.
Okay, I have to give Haley a lot of credit for using a sports reference because I know that's at times it can be a little bit of a stretch for her. Kevin, I gotta ask you.
Me.
Yeah, Kevin, I gotta ask you about this because you've had very strong feelings about Discovery now for a while.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a Star Trek fan, so I'm trying to. I won't rewatch this series, but I do want to be informed of it and what's going on, and I want to see where these characters will end up. There is a little investment in several of these characters, and I don't know how this series will end or what's going to happen, but Picard struggled in the first season a little bit too. I mean, it was entertaining, but I was reading reviews and there was a few things that we had little nitpicks about and stuff, and I think that they're going to kind of return to something that we want to see a little bit more Picard esque in the adventures that he is going to partake in. But we had to first of all solve the problem with Picard in season 1 of him having the issues of his health coming up, and that got fixed. So that was good. Now let's see him write out the rest of this. But for Discovery, it's an interesting conundrum with this series because it's very decisive with fans. And, I can compare it to other fandoms where, it feels like people that I've talked to, the majority of them are happy that there's other options of Star Trek right now, and Discovery is not the only one. And so, Amy, I'm going to defer to you again if your sound is up here because you were just recently on a cruise, and so you were around Star Trek fans, and I know you talked with Star Trek fans. Where is Discovery sitting with your peers there?
Everyone. We didn't really hear this negativity, and everyone just sort of talked about what they liked. And what I found interesting was we got to see, right? We watched Discovery one night and then we watched Picard the next night. And that was absolutely perfect. I don't understand why on their own app, They just can't drop Monday, Thursday, Tuesday, Thursday. Why both on the same day? Because and that sport analogy is absolutely perfect. I love college football. We're going, we're going, we're going. We're getting the bowl games, and then we get our championship games. And then here's NFL. They're doing their championship games. Who cares? College football's on Saturday. NFL, you've got your Sunday, your Monday. It don't matter because I can go from one night to the next. But when you're dropping them on the same time, they don't get the space that they each deserve. And I just wish, because we had that space. We had the whole first night and the whole next day. We were talking Discovery. I remembered it then. And then the next night we were talking Picard. And so I just wish that stupid Paramount would just give us the space we need so that we could celebrate and enjoy both.
Yeah, I'm kind of questioning this drop, but it seems like this is kind of what's happening, where these streaming networks have picked a day that's their day. You know, Disney's kind of taken over Wednesdays, Paramount's kind of taken over Thursdays, Netflix kind of has Fridays or Tuesdays. Amazon seems to be kind of craving out the Friday thing too. Instead of, oh, hey, we're going to spread these out through the week. It's kind of like the days back in what they called premium Sunday night, when HBO would have their premium show, and like when, for example, The Walking Dead was at its peak of popularity, and you have Game of Thrones and The Walking Dead competing against each other. It's like we can't let ourselves spread it out and enjoy it. We've got to put it all out at the same time. Now, granted, it's streaming, so we have the ability to watch it anytime we want. We're not, but still, it does feel like, because I think for a generation like our age too, we're used to that scheduled episodic television still, and now to have two things coming out on streaming, I think for some people it's like no big deal. I'll watch it when I watch it. Other people, it's like I feel like I need to watch it now, and it's like all at the same time, and I'm overwhelmed. Haley, you were gonna.
Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say that maybe the different streaming services need to use their hydrocarbons to communicate with each other.
With that said, though, if you guys remember, 4 or 5 days from now, we were supposed to have the premiere of the Orville on Hulu on Thursday.
Yeah,
and so I'm convinced that whether it was production delays or whatever, I think they were looking like, oh, they're going to drop both Picard and Discovery's last few episodes on these Thursdays. Yeah, we out. It's like walking into that awkward. It's like walking into that awkward, like, you know, room where your in-laws are having an argument, and you're like, yeah, I'm the cousin. I'm out. You know, I'm going to come back later, and then come in when those people are out of the room. So yeah.
Nice.
Well, that is going to wrap up our discussion on this episode of Discovery. It's been fun doing a live show, but we're not quite done yet. So let's open up some subspace signals. Okay, first and foremost, those of you who may have been watching live, thank you so much for taking the time. I know that this is kind of unexpected in the aspect of Union Federation doesn't do live shows, but we are going to be doing more. I have a sneaking suspicion that probably sometime in May, when there's a certain day where Picard ends and Strange New World starts on the same day, we might have a live show to talk about those two big things.
Can I mention something real quick I forgot to say earlier? You guys, I think it was you, Haley, saying that you didn't like the spacesuits, right?
No.
And you as well, Amy, right? You weren't a fan of the spacesuits. I gotta agree with you, because it felt like these weird kind of Tron-esque outfits.
Yes.
And it made me miss the awesome spacesuits they used in Star Trek First Contact when they had to go out and fight on the dish against the Borg. Those suits are really, really cool.
Now, see, those suits were neat, and they also had like the lights on the shoulders, which made complete sense. I felt the lights on these suits were just like they didn't project light out to see your surroundings.
Right.
It was just so you could see your fellow crewmen as to where they were. It made no sense. Yeah. And I felt very Tron. It was Tron.
Yeah.
Hey, no knocking Tron in my presence. So.
I'm not knocking Tron. I'm knocking the EV suits.
Well, obviously, thank you again for those who've been watching either on YouTube, Facebook, whether it's on the Facebook page for Fandom Podcast Network or Union Federation, or even on Twitter. This will be up on YouTube for you guys to see, and we will be putting the podcast version of this episode out later this week before the next episodes of Picard and Discovery come out. Of course, subscribe to our YouTube channel, give us a like, share it out there. We're trying to grow our YouTube presence and have everybody have some fun with it. Of course, visit our master feed for all of our audio podcasts at fpnet.podbean.com. You can also find all of our podcasts on pretty much any of the major podcast catchers, whether it be Apple, iHeartRadio, Spotify, so many others out there. Also, to visit us in the social media realm at the Union Federation Facebook page, where we keep you updated on everything going on with Star Trek and the Orville. You can follow the Union Federation on Twitter and Instagram at Union Fed Podcast. Of course, visit the Fandom Podcast Network's Facebook page for everything that's going on in fandom. And of course, you can hail us at our email address, the unionfederation@gmail.com. You can find me on social media on Twitter at AKyleW or on Instagram at AKyleFandom. Phaser Boy, where can we find you on social media?
Pew, 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 pew. You can find me, of course, on the Union Federation Facebook group that we have there. You can find me on Facebook, also on Twitter and Instagram at Spartan_Phoenix.
And of course, our viewers just all completely went away because Kevin changed the channel on them. Amy, where can people find you and get maybe some suggestions on how to get over your hydrocarbon illness there?
Oh, goodness. Well, you can find me, of course, on our Facebook group. I co-host a couple of other podcasts, Galaxy Class, which is about Next Generation, and Union. That's this one. And All Good Things, which is about all of Star Trek. I am also on Twitter at Miss Amy Nelson.
And Haley, where can people find you?
You can find me on Twitter. I am at Trekkie01D, and I'm also in our Facebook group.
I got to do a quick shout out to Amy because I got to meet one of your fellow co-hosts before you took off on your cruise, and it was a pleasure to meet Rhea, and that was a lot of fun. I'm glad I got that opportunity, and of course, we had a great time at the Kennedy Space Center here in Florida before you went off on your cruise, and probably forgot all about so many things now.
No, it's so wonderful, just seeing Trek family, and you are in my family, so yeah.
Well, before we get out of here, there's a couple great ways to support the Union Federation and the Fandom Podcast Network. Visit our TeePublic store at teepublic.com, search for the Union Federation or any of the great shows on the Fandom Podcast Network. We've got shirts, we've got hoodies, we've got mugs, we've got stickers, we've got laptop cases. We got it all on TeePublic. teepublic.com, search Fandom Podcast Network or the title of your favorite show here on the Fandom Podcast Network. And of course, too, we love reviews, especially on Apple Podcasts, on the Podbean app, on iHeartRadio, on Spotify. Let us know how we're doing. We love those 5-star reviews, but you know what? All the input is good because, as always, we're striving to make better podcasts to feed your ears. Now let's look ahead a little bit to the Orb of Prophecy. Coming up next week, we will have another double dip as we will have the second episode of Star Trek Picard and episode 12 of Star Trek Discovery. We're almost to that season finale. A lot's got to happen in the last couple of episodes, otherwise Discovery might have written themselves into a hole where they got to solve it all again in one episode. So going to be interesting to see how that plays out. Of course, not too far off. We've got Strange New Worlds on May 5th, The Orville in June, Prodigy with the remainder of their season 1 in 2022, and of course Lower Decks will be back in 2022. Quick Prodigy shout out. Playmates is putting out a line of action figures from Prodigy that look incredibly sharp, and yes, there is a Murph, Kevin.
Oh, thank you.
And they are even putting out a Protostar playset.
Nice.
So you can find these pictures up on the internet. They're actually pretty sharp looking. Those figures look like they could be in high demand. I'm looking forward to seeing how they look in person. But until next time, we will be back on Union Federation and all the subspace signals to tell you what else is going on in Star Trek and the Orville. Thank you to my crew. It's been a fun doing this live. We're going to be doing this again, hopefully sooner than later. And we got a lot of exciting things coming our way. Until next time, hailing frequencies are now closed.